Hello. Today is Friday, June 20th. Welcome to episode 467 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. I'm advisory board member Lester Munson. I'm joined today by NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller and NSI Fellow Jeffery Wilson. Jeffrey, are you a fellow or a senior fellow?
I believe the picture tells it all.
Senior. We're going with senior. We're going with distinguished. I think you just got battlefield promotion to distinguished fellow.
I appreciate the brevet promotion.
Folks, it is not Fun Friday. It is Prediction-Free Friday. We will make no predictions on this podcast. This podcast will be prediction-free because I think that is what everyone else is doing. And so as to distinguish ourselves, we are not going to predict whether the U.S. will bomb Fordow in the next 2 weeks. So we will discuss other topics. The big news since we last discussed Iran, which was 2 days ago, is that the White House issued a statement through the spokesperson from President Trump saying that he will decide within the next 2 weeks whether or not the U.S. will participate in Israel's attacks on Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. I think we all know that means using it in part likely means using U.S. munitions, the mother of all bombs, the 30,000-pound explosive that penetrates mountains up to 200 feet or more to get after the enrichment facility and other apparatus buried in a mountain called Fordow in Iran, which Israel has not been able to do. Only the U.S. can do this, we are told in publicly available media. So the question is, Jeffrey, our distinguished fellow, I want to ask you first, does this announcement from the White House of a decision coming within 2 weeks, does it matter?
It does matter. It's not a prediction. It does matter because the president desperately wants to avoid getting deeply involved in this conflict. And he is buying himself 2 weeks of time. The challenge with buying himself 2 weeks of time is that time becomes shorter and shorter with each passing day. It's like the real estate deal that is waiting to close. And he has created, I have to use this, a sort of Damocles moment. It's hanging by a thread, and he's hoping that Iran will come to the table or Israel will finish the job within the next 2 weeks. I don't. If we look at what Iran is saying, is that there's going to be no talks without a ceasefire, and that we have our Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, the man with many roles, Marco Rubio, calling NATO and Gulf allies to ask them to align their responses with ours, which I think is kind of a big ask. It is going to, this begins to become much bigger than just, is the U.S. going to back Israel in taking out a nuclear capability? It has a lot of similarities to past conflicts. I'll go back to 1914. Where small little Serbia started as this little problem that turned into a much bigger conflagration that brought allies from around the world into conflict with each other. This is not the Gulf War of 20 years ago, where it was the U.S. could control the situation. There's a lot of other interests at play here, and domestically, I see. I certainly don't want to see this conflict escalate. I think the president's supporters, depending on which poll you actually look at, so the polls are unique here. They don't agree, but many of his most fierce supporters are arguing amongst each other whether or not the president should become involved. Certainly, many other Americans on all sides of the aisle are weighing in, and the political pressure here at the United States is making making that 2 week window tighter and tighter. And he has made a problem for himself that he probably could have avoided. That's speculation, not anything else.
Martha,
Not true. I'm looking backwards, not forward.
Martha,
So Martha,
No, it's okay.
sorry,
on
Jeffrey.
to you. No, it's on to you.
Martha, Jeffrey goes back to 1914. That's why he's a distinguished fellow. What about, let's go back less than a generation ago to Libya. The U.S. used air power to kill Muammar Gaddafi and do some other things, but basically regime change in Libya. It was the Obama administration. They said it didn't count as a war because Americans weren't in harm's way. Is that an appropriate example to think of as we're thinking about possible U.S. military action in Iran?
No, because we're not looking. We're actually not going after regime change. We are going after the nuclear enrichment, the ambitions of Iran's, their nuclear ambitions, and we know this is a problem. The intelligence has been consistent, for years. The IAEA censured Iran just a few weeks ago, which was actually a somewhat unprecedented rebuke of Iran from the IAEA. And look, I mean, they have been the source of terrorist activity, throughout the region. They've threatened American politicians and policymakers, including President Trump, John Bolton, Brian Hook, Mike Pompeo. I mean, they have actually got hits out on our political class here in the United States, and it actually almost worked last summer against Donald Trump himself. So Iran has proven itself to be a menace. They've been using their proxies not only to go after Israel, but also to terrorize ships going through the Red Sea. That actually affects international commerce. That affects the global economy. It affects especially our European partners whose trade, goes heavily through there. And on top of that, they have been helping Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Their drones have been actually one of the key pieces of Russia's strategy in attacking Ukrainian civilians. They even have a factory. The Iranians have a factory in Russia to make their drones. So the more you decapitate the abilities of the Iranians to act, the safer these other areas will be for the world. So this is not just a regional problem. This is actually helping world global security on many fronts.
Okay, we've added canine entertainment here on the video, folks. This is why you should be watching YouTube. Martha's feed has got a little friend. Let me ask. I'm going to push the question here. I'm going to ask you both, and we'll go lightning round here since we're running out of our allotted 11 or 12 minutes here. I want to push the question on Libya because I don't recall it being the Obama administration's policy to have regime change. I think the policy was to protect people from the predations of the regime. And it just so happens that we ended up basically killing Muammar Gaddafi in the process. President Trump has not used the term regime change, of course. He has said we want to end Iran's nuclear weapons program. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. But he also used the term unconditional surrender. Is that just, so here's the question. Is that just another way of saying regime change? Jeffrey, what say you, sir?
It is, because he also made the threat of saying, I know exactly where the leader is, and we can take him out at any time.
Martha, is it the same?
Look, Iran is a much larger, more populous, more sophisticated, state apparatus. I think the Libya intervention, they did not have any, nuclear, ambitions. Maybe they had ambitions, but not capabilities. Libya was, already, they had years of fragmentation afterwards, but I don't know. I mean, I think we have to be careful with these interventions, of course, because obviously we don't know what's going to happen with Iran. in the aftermath, assuming we do, achieve this goal. But no, I don't see it as being similar.
Okay.
Can I just add that, I think
Jeffrey,
that by saying that there's a 2-week timeline, and I guess he could redefine what he means by that 2-week timeline, but I think it has created a situation where this feels like this is a war of choice, or the U.S. aggression of choice, not out of necessity. And I think that is a piece that typically in the United States we weigh this pretty heavily and say that we must do this, not we should do this out of choice. We kind of learned that in Iraq, and I hope that we would learn that in this situation.
So my view is on this question I asked you guys. Unconditional surrender is effectively another way of saying regime change, and we shouldn't allow people to hide behind the president or anyone else behind different terminology. And the real issues here are they're a war, they are severe, the consequences could be very bad for us, they could be very good for us. We don't know. Once we join the conflict, it's impossible to predict. That's why this is Prediction Free Friday. So we need to be grounded in reality, and saying unconditional surrender is, boy, it's awfully like saying regime change, because and also on a basic political matter, Iran without its nuclear weapons program, you would probably have to have regime change. The regime in Tehran has pinned its legitimacy to this program. It's the thing they fight for. It is the thing that sustains them politically, domestically, and threatens their neighbors internationally and kind of keeps them relevant. So we should all be very grounded here about what the implications are for U.S. involvement here. I'm not predicting anything. I'm not even advocating for anything. I just think we need to be grounded in what is at stake. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, June 23rd, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debate shaking up America. We're now on YouTube. See the dogs on YouTube. Check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.